Okay, well, hello Internet. Welcome back to my home. And today we're going to talk about the fourth part of this 5-part series. So we're almost over, which is great. Part 4 of the CIS controls. So I'm going to go up to the agenda. So the agenda is 13 through 16, and then we're going to talk about a sneaky peeky for next weeky. So first off, the controls, what are they? So the CIS controls, in a nutshell, are basically a group of industry experts from all around the world got together and they said, okay, let's figure out 20 security controls that almost any company can implement to secure themselves. And they basically structured these controls in 3 different maturities for an organization. So an immature organization, small, medium, and then large. And then the sub-controls within each control vary in complexity. So the more complex it is, those are the large organizations, the less complex, the smaller organizations. And there's 20 of them, but we're doing 4 at a time. So we're on the 4th of the 4th. And these are the controls we're going to talk about today. So 13 through 16. We're going to talk about data protection. We're going to talk a lot about controls actually. So the next are all revolving around some type of control. So with that said, let's jump to the first one. So leaky data. So this first one's all about data protection. And in this control, they talk a lot about data loss prevention or data leak prevention. And there's really a difference between the two. And I wanted to kind of discern the difference here. So data loss prevention is when you kind of really lose a lot of data or it's encrypted. So loss in the sense that there's massive data exfiltration or someone actually does a ransomware attack on you and encrypts all your data. So that's a loss situation. Data leak is a little different. So an example for data leak would be an employee accidentally sending some secret or private information to a partner on accident, maybe in an Excel sheet through email. So that's like a small leak prevention. And there's a lot of sub-controls for a lot of the controls I'm speaking about today. So instead of listing them all in the PowerPoint like I've done in the past, I decided to be lazy today and just show you the 2 I want to talk about. So the 2 I'm going to talk about for data loss prevention and data leak prevention is know thy data and no writing. So the first one is know thy data. And this is a common occurrence amongst a lot of the controls, where it's basically having an awareness of the situation. And the situation right here is knowing the data that you have in your organization. So there's different types of data. So the ethos of this sub-control is basically mapping out all the different types of data you have in your company and then ensuring that all of those mappings are associated to who has access, and not just who has access, but also what kind of data is it. So putting labels on the data and maintaining the inventory of the data. So labels usually tend to be kind of like public, private, or restricted, and there's other different types of data labels, but it kind of goes in severity. So the lower the severity, more people can have access, less, etc., and it keeps going up. So this is basically mapping your data and ensuring that there's labels associated to the data. So the next one is no writing. And what this sub-control basically refers to, and I'm looking down this because computer's here, so I'm not pointing at anything, looking at the PowerPoint. No writing. So no writing is basically no writing to external media. So anytime somebody plugs in an external media device, which is usually USB these days, if they plug a USB in and data tries to get written to that device, you've hopefully configured all your systems to ensure that when that attempt happens, you block it immediately. So nobody can actually plug in a USB, automatically write data to the device and then walk out the front door. So it's ensuring that you can prevent that with the data piece. So that's the first one. And the next one is going to be, I think, access controls. Yes, it is. Okay. So we've all met this guy, right? So he's the boss. He's your boss's boss. He's the CEO. He's somebody with a power, with some sort of authority, and they like to take that authority, and that inflates their ego. So sometimes when you work with someone that has a lot of authority and control, they want to show that with others. And they can show that in some ways, sometimes through having a lot of control to having access to a lot of different things. And when you have an executive or some higher up that wants access to all the different systems and all the data, it's important to figure out a way to cohesively work with them and convince them and persuade them that that's not necessarily the best thing. So as an administrator or an InfoSec individual, this doesn't really necessarily come down to the technology, but really it comes down to your ability to persuade another person and let them know that it's not that you don't trust them, it's that you don't trust them without their computer. So if someone hacks their computer and they're not around to prevent it, that computer has access to everything. So ensuring that you limit that individual's access is important. So this is kind of a preface to the subcontrols I wanted to talk about. So access controls, getting access to different things. So the two subcontrols I want to talk about is access control lists, which is ACL, and then the other one is data logs. So the access control lists, specifically I wanted to mention need to know. So this is kind of like the really high priority mandatory access situation, where if you need access to data, it has to be associated to your role. Even, no matter how high you up in the chain, everybody has a certain role. So your role needs specific access to certain systems and certain data. So it's ensuring that this access control list has each name associated to each role, associated to each system and data that they're accessing. So it's keeping kind of tabs on that list and having that list automatically prevent people from getting access to other things. And the next one is data logs. So this is specific to sensitive data. And doing detailed logs on the systems that have access to sensitive data is actually pretty useful. And the subcontrol they explain here is basically anytime someone logs onto a system that has access to sensitive data, you should probably log that kind of attempt or that successful logon. And also another thing is actually having file monitoring. So if you have a really sensitive file or a variety of files in a document, if any of these files are edited in any way or changed in any shape or form, that file monitoring software should automatically notice that, see the baseline, and see the baseline's changed, and then notify you. So it's having that additional subcontrol is pretty good as well. Okay, next one. So this next one is Wi-Fi, actually, yeah. So I wanted to tell you a bit of a story. So I found out about this recently as well. So in 2016 at the Republican National Convention, when Donald Trump was doing his campaign, there was a lot of people at the convention. And what Avast actually did, so Avast is a security company, they set up a few different Wi-Fi points around the convention. And people can log on to this free Wi-Fi, and one was I voted Hillary, and the other one's I vote Trump. And the interesting thing about this is 1,200 people logged on to the I vote and Trump Wi-Fi without ever asking themselves, whose Wi-Fi is this and whose access, like what Wi-Fi am I getting access to? And the important thing that Avast wanted to point out in this experiment was basically rogue Wi-Fi access points and any public any public locations is a pretty big deal. And accessing any Wi-Fi point anywhere without ever questioning who is running that and do you trust them actually having access to your data when you're accessing the internet is an interesting thing. And 1,200 people, I think I said, logged on to this. And yeah, it's fascinating. So the rogue and evil twin piece. So a rogue Wi-Fi access point. So let me go back. So a Wi-Fi access point is basically your ability to access the internet from a Wi-Fi device. So a phone, a laptop, etc. And a rogue access device is basically someone puts out a Wi-Fi access point and it's not supposed to be there, but you can access through it and get access to the internet. But by doing so, you're actually giving that person that runs that access point a lot of your traffic that's being funneled back and forth from the internet so they can see it. And the other one is evil twins, which is the same thing, but actually instead of naming it whatever, you're actually naming it what the access point, the genuine one, is for that corporate network. So if your access point is Dylan's router, and you name it Dylan's router, that's the evil twin, because it's not the right access point, but it's named the same. So a new employee or maybe a gullible employee that's not paying attention could accidentally access this one instead of the real one, and then they automatically are giving up their data to the attacker. So Sketchy Wi-Fi. The subcontrols for this that I wanted to mention are know your WAPs and encryption. So WAPs are what I've mentioned, so wireless access point, that's the acronym. And basically with this piece is two things, so mapping and scanning. So when you first set up all your wireless access points or WAPs, you should map the inventory of WAPs available. So put that all into a list. The next thing you want to do is you want to continuously scan all of the different access points around your network and make sure that it's staying the same. Nothing has changed, nothing has moved, and no additional WAPs have been on that are evil twins or rogue devices. So that's the one thing, is maintaining an inventory. The next thing is encryption. So any wireless traffic period should be encrypted at all times. And the best option now is WPA2. I think WPA3 may have come out, but this uses AES encryption, so it's the best encryption that we have available at this moment in time. So yeah, encrypt all your stuff. Last one, cleaning up your accounts. So this is all about dormant and vacant accounts. User accounts is what I'm referring to. And user accounts, let me kind of explain this in a scenario. So you have contractors, you have temporary employees, you have pen testers, pen testers, and a variety of people that come into your organization temporarily to use an account and then get access to some stuff. And when they get access to that stuff and they're done with their contract or done with the test or done with their stuff, they leave, but that account stays and you don't go back and clean up the account you created. So having all these dormant and vacant accounts sitting around your network is basically, it's like a honeypot, not a honeypot, but it's a golden gift for an attacker, because they go into your network and they have areas to hide in plain sight. So they could sit in these accounts, use these accounts to get access to other things without ever having to create anything new. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to see where they're sitting and who they're using because it's already there. So that's kind of important why this control is listed and why it's important to clean your accounts. So the sub controls I wanted to mention are disabling automatically and tracking behavior. So automatic disablement, so every account that's created should be temporary, no matter who it is, the CEO, whatever. And all these accounts should be temporary, not only based on a contract of achieving a thing, but also it should be time-based. So if you create an account, maybe 30 days, 90 days, however long the contract is, as soon as that contract ends or as soon as that employee leaves, there should be some sort of like if-then-else logic built into these accounts. So once it happens, they're disabled, not deleted. So deleting accounts is kind of not necessarily a good thing because if you delete an account and then maybe 6 months down the road an audit happens and they want to see all the accounts, it's better to disable them so you can use them in future audits. And then the last thing is tracking behavior. So users are habitual, so are humans. Humans are habituals when they do routines. So if I'm logging onto an account and I log on every single day, Monday through Friday at a certain time from a certain location, that's a pattern that can be tracked. So if you can track this pattern and have this baseline, if something changes and someone from New Zealand at like 3 a.m. logs on a Saturday, that's a little strange. So that anomaly in the behavior should be able to be pointed out by some sort of software that you've embedded in your network. So that's another one to kind of keep track, not only of cleaning up the accounts, but also tracking misbehaviors in them. So with that said, we're going to do sneaky peeky for next weeky. This is the last one too. This is part 5 of the 5-part series. So the next one we're going to talk a lot about actually organizational controls. I think it's organizational, yeah, or operational, whatever. So there's 3 categories. I think it's the organizational one. So the first thing is awareness and training, so of your employees. The next is app security. The next is internet, incident response and management. And then the last one is pen testers and red teams, and they are different. So those are the sneaky peekies for next weekies, and it's been fun. This is a great movie if you've not seen it, and I'll see you next week.